For 32 years, the world thought it knew everything about Michael Jordan. The championships, the commercials, the comebacks. But on July 23, 2025, a struggling videographer captured something no one was meant to see. Michael Jordan at his father's grave, revealing secrets about the murder that had never been solved. What began as an invasion of privacy would uncover a conspiracy 3 decades in the making, exposing the truth behind James Jordan's death and forcing both men to confront their deepest wounds. Sometimes the most painful truths are revealed in our most private moments, and this private moment was about to change everything. The summer heat pressed down on Michael Jordan's shoulders as he guided his sleek black Range Rover through the narrow country roads of Teachey, North Carolina. The air conditioning hummed quietly, but Michael had rolled down his window slightly, letting in the familiar scent of pine and summer soil that reminded him of childhood summers, days when his father was still alive. Today was July 23, 2025. 32 years to the day since James Jordan Sr. had been murdered. His body discovered in a South Carolina creek 11 days after he'd been shot. Michael tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening slightly. No matter how many years passed, this day never got easier. He turned onto the gravel road that led to Rockfish AME Church Cemetery, the tires crunching beneath him. Michael had chosen this small, peaceful resting place for his father, away from the spotlight that followed the Jordan name. He parked in the shade of a large oak tree and switched off the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, gathering himself. In the passenger seat lay a bouquet of fresh white lilies, his father's favorite, and beside them a small wooden box with brass hinges that Michael had carried with him for years. He took a deep breath, pulled his Chicago White Sox cap lower over his eyes, and stepped out of the car. The cemetery was empty, except for Elijah Thompson, the 78-year-old groundskeeper who had maintained these grounds for over 40 years. Elijah was pruning some roses near the church entrance, but he straightened when he saw Michael. Their eyes met briefly, and Elijah gave a small, respectful nod. He knew who Michael was. Everyone in these parts did. But Elijah had always maintained a dignified distance when the famous son came to visit his father. Michael appreciated that more than Elijah would ever know. What Michael didn't notice was the figure of Marcus Daniels, crouched behind a cluster of trees about 50 yards away. The 24-year-old videographer adjusted his camera lens, focusing on the tall figure of the basketball legend. Marcus had received an anonymous text message last night. MJ visiting father's grave tomorrow. 10 a.m., Rockfish Cemetery. Could be your big break. Marcus had been desperate enough to follow the lead. 3 years out of film school with nothing but wedding videos and local commercials to show for it, he needed something, anything, to jumpstart his career. Still, as he watched Michael Jordan collect the flowers and box from his car, a wave of guilt washed over him. This felt wrong, deeply wrong. Yet he didn't lower his camera. Michael walked slowly along the path he knew by heart, past weathered headstones and modest family plots. The cemetery was small, just like his father would have wanted. James Jordan hadn't been a man who sought attention or grandeur. He had been a working man who believed in hard work, honesty, and family. Just like today, 32 years ago, Michael murmured to himself, the words hanging in the humid air. He rounded the bend where a simple maple tree stood guard over his father's grave. The headstone wasn't ostentatious. A polished granite marker with the words James R. Jordan Sr., loving husband and father, 1936–1993, engraved beneath a small cross. Michael had insisted on simplicity, knowing his father would have hated anything showy. From his hiding spot, Marcus zoomed in his camera, capturing the moment as Michael stood before the grave. The basketball superstar's shoulders seemed to carry the weight of decades as he stood there, flowers in one hand, the mysterious box in the other. Michael placed the lilies carefully at the base of the headstone, arranging them just so. Then, he unfolded a small camping chair he'd brought from the car and sat down, the way he always did. These visits weren't quick stops. They were conversations, time spent with the man who had shaped him. "Hey, Dad," Michael said softly, his deep voice barely carrying in the still cemetery air. "It's been a year since I last sat here with you." Marcus adjusted his microphone. He shouldn't be able to hear Michael from this distance, but the cemetery was so quiet and the summer air so still that Michael's voice carried just enough for his directional mic to pick it up. "The Hornets still haven't won a championship," Michael continued with a small, sad smile. "I know you'd be giving me grief about that. For a man who won 6 rings as a player, you sure can't build a winning team." He mimicked his father's voice with surprising accuracy. "I'm trying, Dad. Some things are harder than others." Michael opened the wooden box slowly, the hinges creaking slightly. From where he was positioned, Marcus couldn't see what was inside, but he could see how tenderly Michael handled whatever it contained. "Remember when I was 9 and you took me to that Lakers game in Charlotte?" Michael continued. "I told you I was going to play in the NBA someday, and you didn't laugh like most parents would. You just looked at me and said, 'Well, you better start practicing more than twice a week then.' That was you, never discouraging my dreams, but always making sure I understood the work involved." A breeze rustled through the cemetery, causing the leaves above to whisper. Michael looked up briefly, then back at the headstone. "Jeffrey's son, your great-grandson, is playing basketball now. He's only 7, but you should see him, Dad. He's got your patience, doesn't rush shots like I did at that age. Jasmine says he looks like you when he smiles." Michael's voice caught slightly, and he cleared his throat. Marcus zoomed in further, capturing the glisten in the corner of Michael Jordan's eye. The greatest basketball player of all time, fighting back tears at his father's grave. It was the most human Marcus had ever seen him. "Mom's doing okay. She misses you every day. But she's strong. Always has been." Michael adjusted his position in the chair. "My brothers and sister all came down for her birthday last month. We told the same old stories about you. Like that time you tried to fix the roof yourself and fell into the bushes." Michael laughed softly, a sound that seemed to break through his sadness momentarily. "I still think about that night, Dad. July 23rd, 1993. What if you hadn't pulled over? What if you'd taken a different route? What if I'd asked you to stay in Chicago longer after the championship?" His voice hardened. 32 years. And there are still questions that keep me up at night. From his hiding spot, Marcus felt a chill despite the summer heat. He was capturing something raw and private, a side of Michael Jordan the world never saw. The man behind the legend, still wrestling with the tragic murder that had altered his life forever. "I've been continuing those private investigations," Michael said, his voice dropping even lower. "There's new information, Dad. Things that weren't in the trial. Things that might change everything we thought we knew about what happened to you." Marcus zoomed in tighter, struggling to hear as Michael's voice became almost a whisper. "I promised you I'd find out the whole truth, and I'm getting closer. The official story, it doesn't add up. Never did." Michael fell silent for a long moment, just sitting there with the breeze occasionally ruffling his shirt. He seemed lost in thought, in memory, in grief that 3 decades couldn't fully heal. In the distance, Elijah Thompson had finished his pruning and was walking slowly back to the small groundskeeper's shed, deliberately taking a path that gave Michael privacy. The cemetery was otherwise deserted, the summer heat keeping most visitors away until evening. Marcus remained frozen in his hiding spot, camera still recording, heart pounding in his chest. He knew he had gold. Footage that would go viral instantly, that would be picked up by every major network. This intimate moment with Michael Jordan would be his ticket to the career he'd dreamed of. Yet as he watched Michael reach into the wooden box and carefully withdraw what appeared to be an old watch, Marcus felt the weight of what he was doing. This wasn't just a celebrity sighting. This was a son grieving his murdered father 3 decades later. But he didn't stop recording. Michael held the watch up to the sunlight, the gold band catching the light. "They took this from you that night," he said softly. "And now it's back where it belongs, with family. I bring it here every year to remind myself that some things can be recovered. Some things find their way home." He placed the watch back in the box and closed the lid carefully. "I miss you, Dad. Every day, every championship, every failure, every family milestone. There's always a space where you should be." Michael's voice was steady now, but filled with a quiet intensity. "And I'm not going to stop until I know everything about why you're not here." As the sun climbed higher overhead, casting the shadow of the maple tree over the grave, Michael Jordan continued to talk to his father, unaware that his most private moments were being preserved through the lens of a stranger's camera, soon to be shared with the world. "You know what I remember most, Dad?" Michael said, leaning forward in his chair. "That summer when I was 14, and I grew 5 inches in 3 months. Remember that?" Michael smiled at the memory, his eyes distant as he traveled back to Wilmington, North Carolina, 1977. He could still see the small white house on Gordon Road where he'd grown up, the basketball hoop his father had mounted above the garage door, the patch of dirt in the backyard where they'd play catch for hours. Mom kept complaining about having to buy new pants every few weeks, but you just laughed and said, "Dolores, this boy's growing into something special." Michael shook his head. "You didn't even know what sport I'd end up playing then. You were still hoping for baseball." Marcus shifted position behind the trees, his legs beginning to cramp. He adjusted his camera, making sure to keep it steady as he zoomed in on Michael's face. The basketball legend looked different here. Vulnerable. Softer somehow. No trace of the fierce competitor who had dominated courts worldwide. "You were at every game you could make, working those long shifts at GE and still finding time to watch me play," Michael continued, "even when I got cut from varsity sophomore year." Michael's jaw tightened at the memory. Laney High School, 1978. Coach Clifton "Pop" Herring had chosen Leroy Smith, a 6.7 player, over Michael for the final varsity spot. It was a rejection that had fueled Michael's legendary competitive drive for decades. "You didn't let me quit," Michael said softly. "I came home ready to give up basketball altogether. But you wouldn't hear it. You said, 'Make them regret it next year.' And I did, Dad. I did." The breeze picked up slightly, rustling the flowers Michael had placed at the grave. For a moment, he just sat in silence, watching the petals sway. "When I won that first championship with the Bulls in '91, and I cried holding that trophy." Michael's voice grew thick with emotion. "That wasn't just about winning. That was for you, because you believed when nobody else did." From his hiding spot, Marcus felt his heart pounding. This was Michael Jordan, the man who had rarely shown vulnerability in public, laying himself bare. Marcus knew he was witnessing something precious and private, yet he couldn't bring himself to stop recording. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn baseball. He turned it over in his hands, revealing faded signatures. "Found this in a box last month. The ball from that Durham Bulls game you took me to when I was 8. You got 2 players to sign it for me. I was more excited about that ball than anything else that summer." He placed the baseball next to the flowers. "That's why I tried baseball after the first retirement. Did I ever tell you that? Everyone thought it was this big mystery. Why would I walk away from basketball at the peak of my career to struggle in the minor leagues?" Michael laughed softly. "But it wasn't complicated. It was about you, playing the game you loved, the one you taught me first." The Birmingham Barons, Michael's brief minor league career in 1994, it had puzzled sports analysts for years. Few understood it was a son's tribute to his murdered father. "I wasn't any good," Michael admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "You would have given me so much grief about that .202 batting average. I can just hear you. Michael Jeffrey Jordan, are you even watching the ball?" His imitation of his father's voice was so spot on that Marcus found himself smiling behind his camera. "But I needed to try," Michael continued, his voice growing serious again. "After you were gone, I needed to connect with something that reminded me of you. Those bus rides through small towns, playing in those little ballparks. It helped me grieve when nothing else did." Michael fell silent again, lost in thought. Marcus zoomed out slightly, capturing how small even Michael Jordan looked against the expanse of sky and gravestones. "The hardest part was during the playoffs," Michael said after a while. "You'd always call before big games, just to say good luck, nothing special. But those calls, they centered me, Dad." Michael looked down at his hands, the same hands that had held 6 NBA championship trophies. "That first championship we won after you died, 96, after I came back to basketball, I kept waiting for the phone to ring in the locker room before Game 1. Silly, right? I knew you were gone. But some part of me still expected that call." The shadows had shifted now, the summer sun directly overhead. Michael wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. "Remember when I was in high school, and you caught me sneaking out to meet that girl, what was her name? Melissa? You didn't ground me or yell. You just said, 'A man takes responsibility for his actions.' That stuck with me, Dad. Through everything, the fame, the money, the temptations that came with it all, I tried to remember that." Michael rubbed his hands together, looking down at the simple headstone. "When I became a father myself, I realized how much I still needed you. There was no handbook for raising kids in the spotlight. Jeffrey and Marcus got it the worst. So much pressure being Michael Jordan's sons. I tried to protect them from it, but—" He shook his head. "I kept thinking, what would Dad do here? But I never got to ask you." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. His own father, David Daniels, had died when Marcus was 12. A heart attack while coaching Marcus's little league team. The parallel made his hands tremble slightly as he held the camera. "When I bought into the Hornets, bringing basketball back to Carolina, that was for you too," Michael continued. "Keeping it close to home, close to where we started. I thought it would be easy. Another challenge to conquer." He laughed, but there was frustration in it. "Turns out building a winning team is harder than being on one. The losing seasons, the draft picks that didn't work out, the trades that backfired. It's humbling, Dad. Really humbling." Michael stretched his long legs out in front of him, wincing slightly. At 62, his body still carried the toll of 15 NBA seasons. People expect me to work miracles because of what I did as a player. They forget I'm human. You never forgot that. No matter how many points I scored or how many commercials I was in, to you, I was just your son. From behind the trees, Marcus adjusted the focus again. The emotion in Michael's voice was palpable, even from a distance. Mom still tells that story about how you drove all night to get to my North Carolina games when I was in college. Michael smiled at the memory. Working all day at the plant, then driving 4 hours each way, sometimes getting back just in time for your next shift. You never complained once. Michael checked his watch, his father's gesture, one his children often teased him about. I'm trying to be that kind of father, that kind of grandfather now. Present, supportive without pushing. Too hard? It's a balance I'm still figuring out. He sighed. I wish you could see them all. Jeffrey's coaching now, did I tell you that? High school team in Chicago. Jasmine's in sports marketing, and Marcus has his own shoe brand. And the grandkids. 6 of them now. Little James, Jeffrey's oldest, he's got your eyes. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow briefly passing over the grave. Michael watched it soar away. There are days I still get angry about how you were taken, he said, his voice dropping lower. 2 kids on a crime spree. A random carjacking. Wrong place, wrong time, they said, his hands clenched into fists. But you know what keeps me up at night, Dad? The questions that don't add up. Why was your body in the water for 11 days before? They found it? Why did they take your car all the way to Fayetteville? And that phone call from your car? Who were they calling? Marcus leaned in, straining to hear as Michael's voice became almost a whisper. The detectives said it was solved. Open and shut case. But 32 years later, I'm still finding holes in the story. And I've got people looking into it. Good people who don't stop when things get complicated. Michael opened the wooden box. Again, but this time he took out what looked like folded papers. I've got some new information, he said, handling the papers carefully. Things that might change everything we thought we knew about that night. As Michael began to unfold the papers, Marcus zoomed in as far as his lens would allow. But the angle was wrong, the distance too great to make out what was written there. I'm close, Dad, Michael said, intensity replacing the sadness in his voice. I'm close to the truth. And when I find it, when I know exactly what happened that night, I'll make it right. I promise you that. Michael carefully refolded the papers and returned them to the box. He sat in silence for several minutes, just being present with his father's memory, unaware that in the trees beyond, Marcus Daniels was capturing a moment that would soon shock the world and set in motion events neither man could predict. Marcus shifted his weight, trying to ease the cramp in his left leg. He'd been crouching behind these trees for nearly an hour now. His camera battery indicator flashed yellow, a warning he had maybe 20 minutes of recording time left. His phone vibrated in his pocket, but he didn't dare check it. Any movement might give away his position. The anonymous text had come at 11:43 p.m. last night, just as Marcus was editing a commercial for Dale's Auto Parts, the kind of work that paid his bills but crushed his spirit a little more each time. MJ visiting fathers. Grave tomorrow, 10 a.m., Rockfish Cemetery. Could be your big break. At first, he'd dismissed it as a prank. Random texts about celebrities weren't uncommon in his line of work. Everyone thought they had a hot tip that could make a videographer famous. But something about this one felt different. The specificity of time and place. The fact that tomorrow was indeed the anniversary of James Jordan's murder. Marcus had done a college project on famous cold cases and remembered the date. So here he was, watching Michael Jordan through his camera lens, feeling both electric, excitement, and crushing shame in equal measure. "I should stop," Marcus whispered to himself. "This is wrong." But he didn't stop, because Marcus Daniels had been invisible his whole life. The quiet kid in school. The average student who never stood out. The freelancer struggling to make rent in a tiny Wilmington apartment while his film school classmates landed jobs in Hollywood and New York. One viral video. That's all it would take to change everything. Meanwhile, Michael leaned back in his chair, seemingly lost in thought. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less emotional, more reflective. "You know what's funny, Dad? People think they know everything about me. 6 rings, the flu game, the shot, the commercials, the shoes." Michael shook his head. "But they don't know the real stuff, the stuff that matters." He stretched his long legs and looked up at the sky. "They don't know how scared I was buying the Hornets. Everyone thought, 'Oh, Michael Jordan, he can do anything.' But I was terrified of failing. A billion-dollar gamble, and all I could think was, what would Dad say if I lose all this money?" Michael laughed softly. "And they definitely don't know about the panic attacks I started having after retirement. The greatest basketball player ever, waking up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats because he doesn't know who he is without the game." He paused. "That's something I never told anyone, not even Mom." Marcus zoomed in, capturing the subtle changes in Michael's expression. The basketball icon looked tired suddenly, the weight of his public persona visibly heavy on his shoulders. "The gambling stories. They got some of that right," Michael continued, "but they didn't understand why. It wasn't the money. It was the competition. After the games, I still needed that rush, that feeling of having something on the line." He picked up a small stone from beside the grave and turned it over in his hand. "Remember when we'd bet on golf games? $5 a hole, and you'd get so mad when I wouldn't let you win." Michael smiled at the memory. "You taught me that. Never let anyone beat you, not even out of kindness. Respect them enough to give your best." From his hiding spot, Marcus felt his phone vibrate again. 3 texts in a row. Someone really wanted to reach him. He glanced down quickly, keeping the camera steady with one hand. The texts were from his roommate, Tyler. "Dude, where are you? Local news saying MJ spotted near Tichy. Are you seriously stalking Michael Jordan right now?" Marcus silenced his phone completely and refocused on his subject. Michael was standing now, walking slowly around the gravesite. "The last few years have been hard, Dad," Michael said, his voice carrying on the still air. "The world's changed. Basketball's changed. Sometimes I feel like a relic from another time." He stopped at the foot of the grave. "Social media, analytics, player empowerment, it's all different from our day. These kids don't even want to be like Mike anymore." He smiled ruefully. "They want to be like Steph, like LeBron, like Luka. The game moves on. That's how it should be." Michael gazed across the cemetery, his eyes squinting against the sunlight. For a heart-stopping moment, Marcus thought Michael was looking directly at his hiding spot. He froze, not daring to breathe. But Michael's eyes moved on, surveying the peaceful grounds. "Your grandkids barely know who I was as a player. They've seen the highlights, the documentaries. But to them, I'm just Grandpa Mike, who makes bad dad jokes and sneaks them candy when their parents aren't looking." There was contentment in his voice as he said this. "And honestly, Dad, I like that better than being Air Jordan these days." A cardinal landed on a nearby headstone, its bright, red feathers stark against the gray stone. Michael watched it for a moment before continuing. The hardest part of fame isn't getting it. It's living with it when the cheering stops. When you're alone in a room full of people because everyone wants something from you. His voice grew, quieter. I miss normal, Dad. I miss going to the grocery store without causing a scene. I miss having friends who don't keep score of who paid for dinner last. Marcus felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. He'd always imagined Michael Jordan's life as perfect. The money, the fame, the adoration. It had never occurred to him that such massive celebrity might be its own kind of prison. I tried dating last year, Michael said suddenly, with a short laugh. First time since the divorce. Disaster. Absolute disaster. He shook his head. She seemed normal at first. Doctor, from Charlotte, kids grown and gone. But by the third date, she was asking me to sign basketballs for her brother's collection. Turned out she had a whole plan to auction them online. Michael sat back down in his chair. Dating at 62 is hard enough. Dating as Michael Jordan is nearly impossible. He sighed. Mom keeps saying I should try again, that I shouldn't be alone. But sometimes alone is easier than being a prize someone's trying to win. The breeze picked up, rustling the leaves overhead. Michael checked his watch again. I've got that charity thing in Charlotte tonight. Kids from the Boys and Girls Club. They're expecting Air Jordan to show up. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Don't get me wrong, Dad. I'm grateful for everything basketball gave me. The platform, the opportunities, the ability to provide for generations of our family. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. But some days, I wonder what life would have been like if I'd just been good, not great. Just another guy who played some ball, then got a regular job. Would I be happier? Would you still be here? The question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. Marcus's camera battery light changed from yellow to red. 10 minutes left, at most. He cursed under his breath, wishing he'd brought a spare. This footage was gold. Every second of it. The raw vulnerability of a man the world thought it knew, but clearly didn't. I dreamed about you last week, Michael said, his voice so low that Marcus had to adjust the microphone settings to catch it. Same dream I've had since '93. You're sitting in your car at that rest stop, and I'm trying to warn you to keep driving. But you can't hear me. Michael rubbed his eyes wearily. Then it changes, and you're telling me something important about that night. Something I can't quite make out. I wake up every time before I can understand what you're saying. He stood up again, this time walking to the headstone and placing his hand on top of it. I'm going to figure it out, Dad. What really happened? Who was really responsible? The investigation, the trial, there were too many loose ends. Daniel. Green still claims he didn't shoot you, just helped dispose of the body. Larry Demery's story changed so many times. And those phone calls made from your car after you disappeared. Michael shook his head. Nothing adds up. Marcus's heart was pounding now. This was no longer just an emotional visit to a grave. This was Michael Jordan openly questioning the official story of his father's murder. A story that had been closed in the public's mind for decades. My investigators found a witness last month, Michael continued. Someone who saw something that night. Someone who was too afraid to come forward back then. He looked around once more, almost as if checking to make sure he was alone, unaware of the camera capturing his every word and expression. I'm close, Dad, Michael whispered. I'm close to knowing what really happened to you. And when I do, I'll make sure the world knows too. As the battery warning on Marcus's camera began to blink rapidly, he knew he had captured something far bigger than a touching cemetery visit. He had potentially recorded Michael Jordan, suggesting one of the most high-profile murder cases of the 1990s might not be as solved as everyone thought. What had started as an opportunistic attempt at viral fame had just become something much more complicated and dangerous. Marcus's camera battery flashed its final warning. He had minutes, maybe seconds, of recording time left. But Michael Jordan wasn't finished. The basketball legend reached back into the wooden box and carefully removed an object wrapped in soft cloth. "I bring this every year," Michael said, his voice tender, as he unwrapped the cloth to reveal a gold watch. The sunlight caught its face, sending a brief flash of light across the cemetery. "Your watch, the one they took that night." Marcus remembered this detail from his college project. James Jordan's Rolex had been stolen by his killers, who had made the fatal mistake of taking trophy photos wearing it. Those photos had helped lead investigators to Daniel Green and Larry Demery. They recovered it during the investigation, Michael continued, turning the watch over in his hands. "Presented it as evidence in the trial. I couldn't bear to wear it after everything it had been through. But I couldn't just lock it away either." He placed the watch gently on top of the headstone. "So every year I bring it here. Let it spend a little time with you." Michael stared at the watch, lost in thought. Marcus held his breath, knowing his camera might shut off at any second. The cardinal that had landed earlier returned, perching in the maple tree above the grave, its red feathers vivid against the green leaves. "Dad, there's something I've never told anyone," Michael said suddenly, his voice so quiet Marcus had to strain to hear. "Not Mom, not my brothers or sister, not even Juanita when we were married." He looked around once more, as if ensuring his privacy, then leaned closer to the headstone. "The night you died, I was in Chicago, playing cards with some friends. Around 1 in the morning, I got this feeling, like a cold wave washing over me. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what." Michael rubbed his hands together slowly. "I called home, but you and Mom were supposed to be traveling. No one answered." Marcus felt goosebumps rise on his arms despite the summer heat. "I couldn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about you. When they found your body 11 days later." Michael's voice cracked slightly. "Part of me wasn't surprised. I think I knew, somehow, the moment it happened." The camera's battery light was now continuously red. Marcus knew from experience he had less than a minute left. "That connection we had. It didn't end when you died, Dad." Michael smiled sadly. "Jeffrey's son, little James. He's 7 now. Last month he looked at me and said, 'Grandpa, your dad is watching us right now.' Out of nowhere. No one had been talking about you. The kid just felt something." Michael touched the watch again, adjusting its position slightly. "He has that same connection, 3 generations." He laughed softly. "Mom says all Jordan men are a little bit psychic when it comes to family. Maybe she's right." The wind picked up suddenly, rustling the flowers Michael had placed earlier. He looked up at the sky, now dotted with a few gathering clouds. "Weather's changing," he murmured. "Just like you used to predict, Dad. You could always smell rain, coming before anyone else." Michael fell silent again, and Marcus watched as the basketball legend seemed to gather himself for what he wanted to say next. The camera would die any second now. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately," Michael said, his voice steadier now. "Everyone always said that was your gift, the ability to forgive. Remember that neighbor who backed into your car and didn't tell you? When you found out, you invited him over for barbecue the next weekend." Michael shook his head in wonder. "I never had that gift. On the court. Off the court." I held on to every slight, used every perceived disrespect as fuel. I built a career on grudges. There was regret in his voice now. But at 62, I'm tired of carrying all that weight, Dad. He took a deep breath, his broad shoulders rising and falling. That's why this new information about your case is so hard. Part of me wants to let it go, to find peace with what happened. But another part, the part that's still your son, can't rest until I know the whole truth. Marcus's camera beeped softly, the final warning before shutdown. He silently cursed his luck, just when Michael seemed about to reveal something crucial. The investigators found a witness who says there was a third person involved that night. Michael said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Someone who planned the whole thing. Someone who knew your route, your habits. Someone who... The camera died. The red light went out. Marcus fought the urge to cry out in frustration. What had Michael been about to say? Who was this third person? He remained frozen in place, no longer recording but unable to tear himself away. Michael was still speaking, but now Marcus could only see his lips moving, the words lost to distance without the camera's directional microphone. For 10 more minutes, Michael continued his one-sided conversation with his father. He occasionally smiled, occasionally looked pained. Once, he seemed to wipe away a tear. But whatever revelations he might have shared about the new investigation were lost. Finally, Michael stood and gathered his things. He carefully rewrapped the watch and returned it to the wooden box. He collected the baseball he had left earlier, but left the flowers in place. With one final touch to the headstone, he turned and walked slowly back toward his car. Marcus waited until Michael's Range Rover pulled away from the cemetery before emerging from his hiding place. His legs were numb from crouching for so long, and he stumbled slightly as he made his way to the path. Elijah Thompson, the groundskeeper, spotted him immediately. The old man's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What you doing here, boy?" he called out. "This section's closed for maintenance today," Marcus thought quickly. "Bird watching," he said, pointing to the cardinal still perched in the maple tree. "Sorry, I didn't know it was closed." Elijah didn't look convinced, but he nodded toward the exit. "Well, it's closed now. Best be on your way." Marcus nodded and hurried toward the cemetery gates, his camera clutched tightly against his chest. Inside was footage that could make his career, or ruin it. Footage that might reopen one of the most famous murder cases in North Carolina history. Footage that Michael Jordan would definitely not want the world to see. As he reached his car, an old Honda Civic with a dented fender, Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email notification. Final notice. Rent payment overdue. 3 days until eviction proceedings begin. Marcus stared at the screen, then at his camera. The decision that had seemed complicated in the cemetery suddenly became crystal clear. This footage was his ticket out of poverty, his chance to finally break through. And yet, as he started his car, the memory of Michael's grief and vulnerability lingered, the private pain of a public figure. The son still mourning his father 3 decades later. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan," Marcus whispered as he pulled away from Rockfish Cemetery. "But I need this." He didn't notice the black SUV that pulled out behind him, keeping a discreet distance as he headed back toward Wilmington. Nor did he recognize the driver, part of Michael Jordan's security team, a former Chicago police detective who had been watching the cemetery from the road. Michael Jordan hadn't been as alone as he thought. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other clutching his camera. His mind raced faster than his car as he considered what to do with the footage. This wasn't just celebrity gossip or a tearful moment. This was Michael Jordan questioning the official story of his father's murder, suggesting there was an unknown third person involved. That changed everything. His apartment was 20 minutes away, a shabby one-bedroom in a complex that had seen better days. As Marcus pulled into the parking lot, he scanned his surroundings, out of newfound paranoia. Nothing seemed out of place. The black SUV that had followed him from the cemetery had hung back, waiting until Marcus turned into his complex before continuing down the road. Marcus's roommate, Tyler, was sprawled on their second-hand couch, playing video games when he walked in. "Dude, where have you been?" Tyler asked without looking away from the screen. "You missed Diane calling. Twice. Something about the Dale's Auto Parts commercial being late." "I got something better than Dale's Auto Parts," Marcus said, waving his camera. "Way better." Now, Tyler paused his game. "What did you do?" Marcus connected his camera to his laptop, hands trembling with excitement as he transferred the files. "I got Michael Jordan visiting his father's grave, talking about stuff nobody knows, private stuff." Tyler's eyes widened. "You're kidding me. How did you even know he'd be there?" "Got a tip," Marcus said, not meeting his roommate's eyes. Anonymous text. "And you just decided to go spy on Michael Jordan at his dad's grave?" Tyler looked uncomfortable. "That's pretty messed up, man." Marcus felt a flicker of shame, but pushed it aside. "It's not like that. This is journalism." "Journalism?" Tyler scoffed. "Hiding in bushes with a camera is stalking, not journalism." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. The footage was transferring to his laptop. Soon, the world would see a side of Michael Jordan they'd never seen before. And Marcus Daniels would no longer be a nobody. He worked quickly, editing the raw footage into a 3-minute clip that showcased the most emotional moments. Michael talking about missing his father's guidance, his struggles with fame, his hints about the murder investigation. Marcus carefully cut out any mention of the third person involved in the murder. That was his insurance policy, content he could release later if the first video went viral. "I'm telling you, this is wrong," Tyler said, watching over his shoulder. "That's a man at his father's grave. It's private." "He's a public figure," Marcus argued, though the justification felt hollow even to him. "People want to see this." "Not everything is for public consumption," Tyler replied. "Some moments should stay private, even for celebrities." But Marcus had already made up his mind. At 2:15 p.m., he uploaded the edited clip to his social media accounts with the caption, "Exclusive: Michael Jordan's private graveside conversation with his murdered father." "Now we wait," he said, his finger hovering over the post button. With one click, there would be no going back. He pressed it. For 30 minutes, nothing happened. Marcus refreshed his pages constantly, watching the view counter climb slowly. 50 views, 100 views, 200 views. Then everything exploded. A sports blog picked it up first, then TMZ, then ESPN. By 3:30 p.m., Marcus's phone was ringing non-stop with calls from news outlets, talent agents, and social media managers. His video had jumped to 500,000 views and was climbing by the thousands every minute. "Holy shit," Tyler whispered, watching Marcus's social media follower count skyrocket. "It's actually working." Marcus could barely keep up with the notifications. CNN wanted an interview. Good Morning America was offering an exclusive. His inbox filled with messages from people he hadn't heard from in years. Old classmates, former teachers, distant relatives, all suddenly remembering their connection. To Marcus Daniels. "I told you," Marcus said, a giddy laugh escaping him. This is my big break. Then his phone lit up with a call from a number he didn't recognize. An 847 area code. Chicago. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Is this Marcus Daniels?" The voice was male, professional, cold. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Richard Mills. I'm head of security for Mr. Jordan. We need to talk about the video you posted today." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "How did you get my number?" "We have resources, Mr. Daniels, and we've been aware of your activities since this morning at the cemetery. The black SUV. They'd been watching him all along." "I haven't done anything illegal," Marcus said, his voice betraying his nervousness. "Perhaps not," Mills replied evenly, "but Mr. Jordan would like to meet with you personally to discuss the situation. Today." Before Marcus could respond, his call waiting beeped. Another unknown number, this one with a New York area code. "I'll have to call you back," he told Mills quickly, switching to the other call. "Marcus Daniels? This is Vanessa Chen from Celebrity News Network. We'd like to offer you $75,000 for an exclusive interview about your Michael Jordan footage." Marcus nearly dropped his phone. $75,000. More money than he'd made in the past 3 years combined. I'll need to think about it," he stammered. "Don't think too long," Chen replied. "This offer expires in an hour." Marcus ended the call, his phone buzzed with a text from Mills. "Mr. Jordan is at the Cape Fear Hotel, Suite 1205. Be there at 6 p.m. Come alone." "What are you going to do?" Tyler asked, watching Marcus's face cycle through emotions. Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang again. This time it was his mother. "Marcus Jonathan Daniels." Her voice was tight with disapproval. "What have you done? It's all over the news. You spying on Michael Jordan at his father's grave? I raised you better than this." "Mom, it's complicated," Marcus began, but she cut him off. "No, it's not complicated. It's wrong. Your father would be so disappointed." The mention of his father hit Marcus like a physical blow. Suddenly, the parallels between Michael Jordan's grief and his own seemed overwhelming. Both men had lost their fathers, one to murder, one to a heart attack, and both still carried that loss decades later. "I'll fix it," Marcus said quietly, "somehow." Meanwhile, 20 miles away in Wilmington, Michael Jordan was just learning about the viral video. He'd been visiting his childhood home when his daughter Jasmine called, her voice shaking. "Dad," she said, "there's a video of you at Grandpa's grave all over the internet. You need to see this." Michael felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "What video? What are you talking about?" "Someone recorded you this morning. It's everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, even CNN is running it." Michael's security team immediately gathered around him as he watched the clip on his phone. His most private moments, his grief, his vulnerability, his quiet conversation with his father's memory, had been turned into viral entertainment. "Find who did this," Michael said to Mills, his voice dangerously calm. "Now." But they already knew. The surveillance team had photographed Marcus at the cemetery and run facial recognition. They had his name, address, phone number, and employment history within an hour. "His name is Marcus Daniels," Mills reported. 24 years old. Freelance. Videographer. No criminal record. Lives in Wilmington. "Bring him to me," Michael said. "No lawyers, no team. Just him and me." As Michael waited in his hotel suite, the video's view count passed 10 million. Online forums exploded with discussions about James Jordan's murder. Old conspiracy theories resurfaced, and sports commentators analyzed Michael's body language. And words for hidden meanings, CNN ran a special report. Michael Jordan's grief, 32 years after his father's murder, ESPN assembled a panel to discuss the impact of James Jordan's death on Michael's career. Twitter users picked apart every word, every gesture, creating memes and reaction videos. Michael's phone filled with messages from family members, former teammates, and friends, all checking if he was okay, all expressing outrage at the invasion of his privacy. He answered none of them. Instead, he sat alone in his hotel suite, watching the online view counter climb higher and higher, waiting for the young man who had exposed his most private grief to the world. The betrayal was complete. The damage was done. And Marcus Daniels was about to face Michael Jordan, not the smiling pitchman from commercials or the composed businessman from press conferences, but the intensely private man whose boundaries had been violently crossed before heading to the Cape Fear Hotel. Michael made one stop. He drove his Range Rover to a modest brick house in Wilmington's historic district, the home of Fred Lynch, his former high school coach at Laney High. At 75, Coach Lynch moved slower these days, but his mind remained sharp, especially when it came to the Jordan family history. "I saw the video," Lynch said as he welcomed Michael into his living room. No pleasantries, no small talk, just acknowledgement of the situation. That's why Michael had always appreciated him. "Terrible invasion of privacy, Mike." Michael nodded, sinking into an armchair that seemed too small for his frame. "It's out there now. Can't put that genie back in the bottle." "What are you going to do about it?" Lynch asked, lowering himself carefully into his recliner. "Meeting the kid who filmed it in an hour." Michael's voice was tight with controlled anger. "But I needed to talk to you first. About Dad's case." Lynch's expression grew serious. "You mentioned something in that video about new information." "That wasn't supposed to be public," Michael said. "But now that it is, I need your perspective. You remember things from back then that even I've forgotten." Coach Lynch had been more than just Michael's basketball mentor. In the days following James Jordan's disappearance and eventual discovery, he had been by the family's side, helping shield them from the media frenzy. He had attended the entire trial of Daniel Green and Larry Demery, taking detailed notes that he later shared with Michael. "Tell me what you found," Lynch said, leaning forward. Michael pulled out his phone and showed Lynch a series of photographs. "My investigators located a witness who worked at the gas station near where Dad was killed. Guy named Thomas Walters. He was too scared to come forward in '93, but he's talking now." Lynch studied the photos. An elderly black man sitting at a kitchen table, speaking with a woman in a business suit. "What's he saying that changes things?" Lynch asked. "He says there was another car at the Frontier gas station that night, a blue sedan with North Carolina plates. 2 men inside watching the highway." Michael's voice grew intense. He remembers it because one of the men came in to buy cigarettes while he was working the night shift. The guy asked if he'd seen a red Lexus come through. "Your father's car," Lynch said quietly. "Exactly. Dad's car." 20 minutes later, that same red Lexus pulled in for gas. Dad was driving. Michael stood up, too agitated to remain seated. "This witness, Walters, says the blue car pulled out after Dad left, following in the same direction. And he's just coming forward with this now, 32 years later?" Lynch sounded skeptical. He was 19 then, with a record for marijuana, possession, scared of police, scared of getting involved. Michael paced the small living room. Plus, he says a detective interviewed him briefly, but seemed uninterested in the blue car. Never followed up. Lynch nodded slowly, processing this information. "You think these men in the blue car were working with Green and Demery?" "I think they might have been directing the whole thing." Michael stopped pacing and looked directly. at his old coach. Green and DeMary were local troublemakers, opportunistic thieves. But this, following a specific car, at a specific time, on a specific route, that sounds planned. But why? Lynch asked the question that had haunted Michael for decades. Why target your father? Michael sat back down, his voice dropping lower. That's what I can't figure out. If it was random, why follow his car? If it was targeted, why James Jordan? He wasn't wealthy on his own. He wasn't involved in anything illegal or controversial. Unless, Lynch hesitated. Unless what? Michael pressed. Unless he wasn't the actual target, Lynch said carefully. Unless the target was you, through him. The room fell silent as the implication hung in the air. Michael had considered this possibility many times over the years, that his fame, his wealth, or something else in his life had somehow painted a target on his father's back. I had enemies, Michael acknowledged. Gambling debts that were exaggerated by the press, business competitors, people who lost money betting against the Bulls. And your first retirement came right after your father's murder, Lynch added. There were all those conspiracy theories. Michael remembered the ugly rumors that had swirled after his shocking decision to retire from basketball in October 1993, just months after his father's murder. Whispers that the NBA had secretly suspended him for gambling, that his retirement was actually a punishment, that his father's death was somehow connected. All garbage, Michael said firmly. I left because I was broken after Dad died. Basketball didn't matter anymore. I know that, Lynch assured him, but the timing created questions for people who didn't know you. Michael checked his watch. The meeting with Marcus Daniels was in 30 minutes. There's something else, he said, pulling a folder from his jacket. Phone records from Dad's car phone. The police report mentioned 2 calls made from it after his disappearance. One to a pizza place in Fayetteville, one to a pager number that was never identified. I remember, Lynch nodded. My team finally traced that pager number. Michael handed Lynch a printout. It belonged to a man named Victor Gutierrez. Mean anything to you? Lynch shook his head. No. Who is he? Was. He died in 1997. Car accident in Charlotte. Michael's eyes narrowed. Except there were irregularities with the accident report. Single vehicle crash, no witnesses, body burned beyond recognition. Identified by dental records only. You think it wasn't an accident? It wasn't a question. 4. Years after Dad's murder, the owner of a mystery pager that received a call from my dead father's phone dies in a suspicious crash? Michael shrugged. Seems like a loose end being tied up. Lynch leaned back in his chair, looking suddenly older. This is bigger than 2 kids stealing a car, isn't it? I think so, Michael said quietly. And now, thanks to that video, whoever was involved knows I'm still looking into it, that I have new information. You think you could be in danger? Lynch asked, concern evident in his voice. Maybe. But more likely, they'll just try to cover tracks, destroy evidence. Silence Walters. Michael stood to leave. I need to deal with this videographer first, then move Walters somewhere safe until we can get his official statement on record. At the door, Lynch put a hand on Michael's shoulder, the same gesture he'd used to calm a teenage Michael after tough losses. Be careful with this Daniels kid, Mike. You're angry, and you have every right to be. But don't do something you'll regret. Michael nodded, but his jaw remained tight. I'll try to remember he's just a kid looking for a break. A break he tried to get by. Breaking your trust, Lynch reminded him. But still, just a kid. 20 minutes. Later, Michael sat in Suite 1205 of the Cape Fear Hotel, waiting. The room was large and tastefully decorated, with views overlooking the Cape Fear River. His security team had swept it for recording devices and then stationed themselves discreetly throughout the hotel. One in the lobby, one by the elevators, one at the end of the hall. Michael had insisted on meeting Marcus alone. No lawyers, no security in the room, no witnesses. Just the two of them. At precisely 6 p.m., there was a knock at the door. "It's open," Michael called. Marcus Daniels entered slowly, looking nothing like the confident videographer who had uploaded footage of Michael's private moments hours earlier. He was pale, his hands visibly shaking, his eyes darting nervously around the suite before settling on Michael. "Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for—" "Sit down," Michael interrupted, pointing to a chair across from him. There was no warmth in his voice, no hint of the charm that had sold millions of sneakers and entertained fans for decades. Marcus sat, perching on the edge of the chair as if ready to bolt at any moment. For 30 long seconds, Michael just stared at him, saying nothing. It was a tactic he'd used on young players who challenged him on the court. Silent intimidation, letting their own imagination work against them. It was working on Marcus, who finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry about the video. I shouldn't have—" "Do you know what you've done?" Michael asked, cutting him off again. His voice was low but intense. "Beyond invading my privacy? Beyond exploiting my grief for clicks?" Marcus swallowed hard. I didn't think—" "You've potentially interfered with an ongoing investigation," Michael said. "You've alerted certain people that I'm still looking into my father's murder. People who thought that case was closed and forgotten." Marcus looked confused. "The men who killed your father are in prison. One's been there for 30 years. "The men who pulled the trigger are in prison," Michael corrected him. "But that video you posted contains information suggesting others were involved. Others who are still free. And now they know I'm looking for them." For the first time, real fear showed in Marcus's eyes. Not just fear of Michael Jordan's anger, but fear of being caught in something much larger and more dangerous than he had imagined. "I didn't know," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "I thought it was just personal moments. I didn't realize there was an investigation." Michael leaned forward, his Sixth Sense frame making the hotel room's furniture seem child-sized by comparison. "Why would you do this to another human being?" he asked, each word deliberate and controlled. "Forget that I'm Michael Jordan. Why would you film anyone's private moment at their father's grave?" Marcus looked down at his hands, unable to meet Michael's intense gaze. "I got a text, anonymous, saying you'd be there, that it could be my big break." He swallowed hard. "I've been struggling for years, living paycheck to paycheck, shooting commercials for tire shops and dentists. So you decided to exploit my grief for your career?" Michael's voice remained unnervingly calm, which somehow made it more intimidating than if he'd shouted. "It wasn't like that." Or, Marcus corrected himself, finding a small scrap of honesty. "It wasn't just like that. When I got there, I was going to leave. It felt wrong, but then you started talking, and it was so real, so human. I thought people should see that side of you. That wasn't your decision to make." Michael stood up suddenly, making Marcus flinch. But instead of approaching him, Michael walked to the window, staring out at the Cape Fear River below. "My entire adult life has been public property. Every game, every championship, every failure. All dissected for entertainment. But that cemetery visit was mine. Just mine and my father's." The pain in Michael's voice was so raw that Marcus felt tears prick at his own eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Truly." Michael turned back to face him. "Sorry doesn't undo the damage." My children had to see their father's private grief turned into viral content. My mother had to relive her husband's murder because it's trending on Twitter. Marcus hadn't considered the ripple effects of his actions, how they would impact Michael's entire family. The weight of what he'd done pressed down on him with crushing force. Celebrity News Network offered me $75,000 for an exclusive interview, Marcus blurted out. I didn't take it. I was going to, but after your security called, I turned it down. You want a medal for having the bare minimum of decency? Michael asked, his eyebrow raising slightly. After already crossing every line? No, I wanted you to know I realized it was wrong. Too late, but I realized it. Marcus's voice cracked. My mom called me. She was so ashamed of what I'd done. She said my dad would be disappointed in me. At the mention of Marcus's father, something shifted in Michael's expression. Your father? He died when I was 12. Heart attack at my Little League game. Marcus didn't know why he was sharing this with Michael Jordan of all people, especially now, but the words tumbled out. He was coaching third base. 1 minute he was giving signals, the next he was on the ground. Michael returned to his seat, studying Marcus with new interest. So you know what it's like to lose a father. Yes, and Marcus hesitated, then continued, I talked to him too, at his grave, like you were doing. That's why I kept filming. It felt familiar. The admission hung in the air between them. Michael's expression remained unreadable, but some of the coiled tension seemed to leave his body. Do you still have the camera with you? Michael asked suddenly. Marcus nodded, reaching slowly into his bag and removing his camera. Yes. Why? Was there more footage than what you posted online? The clip was only about 3 minutes long. Yes, Marcus admitted. I edited it down. There's about 40 minutes total. Michael held out his hand. Show me what else you recorded. Hesitantly, Marcus handed over his camera. Michael examined it for a moment, then asked, How do I see the rest? Marcus leaned forward and showed him how to access the playback function. For the next 10 minutes, they sat in silence as Michael reviewed footage of himself at his father's grave. Moments Marcus had chosen not to share publicly. Michael's expression changed subtly as he watched. Anger giving way to something more complex. You could have posted all of this, he said finally. The parts where I talk about the new witness, the parts about the investigation. But you didn't. It felt too private, Marcus admitted. Too personal. I know that sounds hypocritical after what I did post, but there was a line even I couldn't cross. Michael handed the camera back. The damage that's done with what you've already shared is bad enough, but it could have been worse. What happens now? Marcus asked, dreading the answer. Are you going to sue me? Press charges? I could, Michael acknowledged. My lawyers would be happy to come after you for invasion of privacy, emotional distress, commercial exploitation of my image. They'd take everything you have and everything you might earn for the next 20 years. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face, his entire future collapsing before his eyes. But that wouldn't solve my real problem, Michael continued. The investigation into my father's murder. The new witness who might be in danger now that people know he exists. Because of what I posted, Marcus said, the full weight of his actions sinking in. Because of what you posted, Michael confirmed. They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation pressing down on both of them. Finally, Marcus spoke again. What if I could help fix what I broke? Michael's eyebrow raised, slightly. How exactly would you do that? I'm good at what I do, Marcus said, finding a small spark of confidence. Not the spying part, the video part. I could help document your investigation properly. Create a record that's controlled on your terms. Why would I trust you with anything after what you did? Michael's voice was skeptical, but not dismissive. Because I have nothing left to lose, Marcus said simply. Because I know I did something unforgivable, and I want to make it right. And because, he hesitated, then finished. Because I know what it's like to have unanswered questions about your father. Mine was just coaching third base 1 minute and gone the next. The doctors said it was a congenital heart defect. But sometimes I wonder if something else caused it. If something could have been done. Michael studied Marcus for a long moment. His legendary competitive intensity focused entirely on assessing the young man before him. If, and that's a big if, I were to let you help document this investigation, you would sign an NDA so airtight that if you violated it, you'd be living in a cardboard box. Everything you film would belong to me. You would follow my rules without question. And you would publicly apologize for the invasion of privacy. Marcus nodded quickly. Yes, to all of it. And you would take down the video you've already posted. I'll do it right now, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. Michael held up his hand. Not yet. The damage is already done. And suddenly, removing. It might alert certain people that something's happening. For now, leave it up. Act normal. Marcus put his phone away, confusion evident on his face. I don't understand. You don't need to understand everything yet, Michael said. You just need to decide if you're in or out. In, Marcus said without hesitation. Absolutely in. Michael nodded once, decision made. The investigation into my father's murder has been ongoing for years. Quietly, with private investigators, off the books. But recently, we've made real progress. He stood and walked to a briefcase sitting on the desk, opening it to reveal files and photographs. Thomas Walters, the gas station attendant, is the first witness in 30 years to suggest that Green and Demery weren't acting alone, that they were directed to target my father's car specifically. By who? Marcus asked, cautiously standing to look at the files. That's what we don't know yet, Michael said, but I intend to find out. And now, thanks to your video, whoever was behind it knows I'm looking. The implications hung in the air between them. Mr. Jordan, Marcus began, but Michael cut him off. If you're going to work with me on this, call me Michael. Mr. Jordan was my father. It was a small thing. But in that moment, it felt like the first tiny step toward redemption for Marcus. Not forgiveness, he knew better than to expect that, but a chance to help rather than harm. There's a car waiting downstairs, Michael said, closing the briefcase. My team needs to move Thomas Walters to a secure location tonight. You're coming with us. Now? Marcus asked, surprised at how quickly things were moving. Now, Michael confirmed. You want it in? This is in. As they prepared to leave the hotel room, Michael fixed Marcus with one final penetrating look. This doesn't make us friends. This doesn't mean I forgive what you did. But maybe, you can help make something right, come out of something wrong. Marcus nodded, understanding completely. He had violated Michael Jordan's privacy, exposed his grief, and potentially endangered people involved in a murder investigation. There would be no easy redemption from that, but there might be a path forward, a chance to use his skills for something meaningful rather than exploitative. As they stepped into the hallway, Michael's security team falling in around them, Marcus realized He was now part of something much bigger than a viral video or a career breakthrough. He was part of Michael Jordan's 32-year quest for the truth about his father's murder. And that truth, whatever it was, might be dangerous to uncover. The black SUV cut through the night, heading south on Highway 74. Michael sat in the middle row, reviewing files on a tablet. Marcus was in the back, his camera bag between his feet, still processing the dramatic turn his day had taken. In the front passenger seat, Richard Mills, Michael's head of security, spoke quietly into his phone, arranging the safe transport of Thomas Walters. "We're 20 minutes out," Mills said, ending his call. "The witness is ready for pickup. He's nervous, but cooperative." Michael nodded without looking up from his tablet. "Tell him I'll be there personally. That should help." Marcus stared out, the window at the passing landscape, the reality of his situation sinking in. 12 hours ago, he'd been a struggling videographer filming wedding videos and local commercials. Now he was in Michael Jordan's security detail, involved in what seemed like something out of a thriller movie. Secret witnesses, unsolved murders, mysterious third parties. "I have questions," Marcus said finally, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Michael looked up from his tablet. "I'm sure you do. Doesn't mean I'll answer them." "Fair enough," Marcus conceded. "But if I'm going to help document this investigation, I need to understand at least some of what's happening." Michael studied him for a moment, then set the tablet aside. "What do you want to know?" "You said Thomas Walters saw a blue sedan following your father's car that night. But the official story has always been that Green and Demery were opportunistic. Thieves who saw your father sleeping in his car at a rest stop. They weren't following him." "That's the story that was presented at trial," Michael agreed. "It's the story that sent both men to prison. Green still insists he didn't shoot my father, just helped dispose of the body. Demery testified that they stumbled upon the car by chance and decided to rob it." "But you don't believe that," Marcus said. "I didn't, even back then. Too many loose ends." Michael looked out the window. "My father was meticulous about driving. He wouldn't just pull over and fall asleep with the windows down, the car running, and the timing never made sense. Why was his body in the water for 11 days before they found it? Why did the killers keep using his car, his phone? Why call that pager number?" Marcus considered this. "And now this gas station attendant is saying they were being followed?" "Not just followed. Targeted. Someone was looking specifically for my father's red Lexus." Michael's jaw tightened. "Which means his death wasn't random. It was planned." The implications hung in the air between them. Marcus thought about his own father's sudden death. A heart attack that came without warning. At least there had been a clear medical explanation, no lingering questions of foul play or conspiracy. He couldn't imagine carrying such doubts for 32 years. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, the words feeling inadequate. "Both for what happened to your father and for what I did today." Michael didn't acknowledge the apology. Instead, he asked a question of his own. "You said your father died when you were 12. Heart attack at your baseball game." "Yes," Marcus replied, surprised by the shift in conversation. "He was 42. No warning signs, no previous health issues. 1 minute, he was coaching third base. The next—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "What do you remember most about him?" Michael asked, his voice softer now. The question caught Marcus off guard. "His laugh," he answered after a moment. "It was loud, embarrassingly loud when I was a teenager. He'd laugh at movies, and people 3 rows away would turn around." A small smile crossed his face at the memory. "And he was always filming things." Had this old VHS camcorder he carried everywhere. My games, school plays, family vacations. I think that's why I got into videography. Michael nodded, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. My dad was the opposite. Never took pictures, never recorded anything. Said he wanted to experience life. Directly, not through a viewfinder. But he kept everything. Every newspaper clipping about my games, every ticket stub. Had boxes of them in the garage. For a brief moment, they were just two men sharing memories of their fathers. The confrontation from the hotel room temporarily suspended. "Does it get easier?" Marcus asked hesitantly. "Living with it?" Michael understood the question without needing clarification. "Not easier. Different. The pain changes shape over time. Less sharp around the edges, but always there." Marcus nodded, thinking of his own experience with grief. "I still have dreams where he's alive. Where I come home and he's just sitting. There in his chair watching baseball like nothing ever happened." "Yeah," Michael said quietly. "Those don't stop." The SUV turned onto a rural road, slowing as it approached a small ranch-style house set back among pine trees. Security floodlights illuminated the front yard, highlighting a weather-beaten pickup truck in the driveway. "We're here," Mills announced, from the front seat. "Thomas Walters lives alone. No family in the immediate area. Should be a simple extraction." Michael gathered his files. "Marcus, bring your camera. I want this interview documented properly." As they approached the house, Marcus felt a newfound appreciation for the trust being placed in him, however tentative. He adjusted his equipment with practiced efficiency, preparing to record what could be crucial testimony. Mills knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Mr. Walters? It's Richard Mills. We spoke on the phone." Still no answer. Mills exchanged a concerned look with Michael, then tried the doorknob. It turned easily in his hand. Unlocked. "Stay behind me," Mills instructed, drawing a concealed handgun from his shoulder holster. He pushed the door open slowly. "Mr. Walters?" The living room was dark except for the flickering blue light of a television playing with the volume muted. Mills reached for a light switch on the wall, flooding the room with harsh overhead light. "Oh no," Marcus whispered. Thomas Walters lay on the floor beside an overturned coffee table, blood pooling beneath his head. Mills rushed forward, checking for a pulse, but his grim expression told them what they needed to know. "He's gone," Mills confirmed. "Gunshot wound to the head. Recent. Maybe an hour ago." Michael stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled emotion. "We were too late." Marcus raised his camera instinctively, then hesitated, looking to Michael for permission. Michael nodded once, and Marcus began recording the scene, careful to stay out of Mills's way as the security chief examined the room for evidence. "No signs of forced entry," Mills noted, pointing to the intact door and window locks. "He either knew his killer or opened the door voluntarily." Michael moved slowly through the small house, his athletic frame seeming too large for the modest space. In the kitchen, he stopped suddenly. "Mills, look at this." On the refrigerator door, held in place by a magnet, was a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "James Jordan, father of basketball star, missing." It was dated July 1993. "He kept it all these years," Michael said, his voice tight with emotion. "Knew who my father was from the beginning." Mills examined the rest of the dirty kitchen. "Back door's open. That's probably how the killer left." Marcus continued filming, documenting the scene methodically, professionally. Despite the horror of what they'd found, he felt a strange calm descend over him. This was no longer about his career or viral videos. A man was dead, likely murdered, because of information he possessed about James Jordan's death. "We should call the police," Marcus said, lowering his camera. "Not yet," Michael replied, surprising him. "We need to check the house first, see if Walters left any record of what he knew." "That's evidence tampering," Marcus protested. "We can't. I've waited 32 years for answers," Michael cut him off. "If there's something here that can help us understand what happened to my father, I need to see it before it disappears into an evidence locker." The ethical dilemma was clear on Marcus's face. Michael noticed his hesitation and added, "Keep the camera running. Document everything." "We do. We're not destroying evidence, just examining it." Mills had already begun a careful search of the living room, wearing latex gloves he'd pulled from his pocket. "Professional hit," he observed, pointing to Walter's wound. "Single shot, close range, probably with a silencer given that none of the neighbors reported hearing anything." Marcus kept filming as Michael moved through the house, opening drawers and checking cabinets. In the small home office, Michael found what he was looking for: a manila envelope labeled "Jordan Case" in shaky handwriting. "Here," he called to the others. "This is it." Mills and Marcus joined him as he carefully opened the envelope. Inside were handwritten notes, old newspaper clippings, and a small flash drive. "He was keeping his own records," Michael said, scanning the notes quickly. "Dates, times, descriptions of the men in the blue sedan." Mills took the flash drive. "We should check what's on this." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the night. Someone had called the police. Perhaps a neighbor who had noticed the unfamiliar SUV or spotted the security team's activity. "We're out of time," Mills said urgently. "We need to leave now, before the police arrive." Michael hesitated, looking at the body of Thomas Walters, another life lost in connection to his father's murder. "We can't just leave," Marcus said. "That's fleeing a crime scene." "We didn't commit any crime," Mills countered. "But explaining why Michael Jordan is in this house with a dead man who has connections to his father's murder will take hours we don't have. Hours during which whoever did this could be destroying other evidence." The sirens grew louder, maybe half a mile away now. Michael made his decision. "Take the flash drive and the notes. Leave everything else exactly as we found it." He turned to Marcus. "Stop recording. Now." Marcus hesitated, torn between his new commitment to Michael and his sense of what was right. The camera continued rolling. "I said, turn it off," Michael repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. This time, Marcus complied, lowering the camera and stopping the recording. "We were never here," Mills instructed, as they moved quickly toward the back door. "We never saw the body. We never touched anything." As they slipped out into the darkness behind the house, Marcus felt the weight of this new secret. He was no longer just documenting an investigation. He was now complicit in it. And somewhere out there, someone was killing to keep the truth about James Jordan's murder buried. The SUV sped through the night, putting distance between them and Thomas Walters' house as police cruisers passed them heading in the opposite direction. No one spoke for several minutes. Mills drove with focused intensity. Michael stared at the flash drive in his hand, and Marcus looked out the window, wrestling with what they had just done. "We left a murder scene," Marcus finally said, breaking the silence. "We took evidence. That's illegal. So is filming someone at a private moment without their consent," Michael replied without looking up. "But here we are, working together anyway." The rebuke stung, but Marcus couldn't argue with it. "What's on the flash drive?" he asked instead. "We'll find out when we get somewhere safe," Mills answered. "Right now, our priority is distance and deniability. They drove for another 30 minutes, eventually pulling into the parking garage of a different hotel in Wilmington, the Riverview Suites, a modest establishment compared to the luxury of the Cape Fear Hotel where they'd met earlier. "We have a room booked under a company name," Mills explained as they took a service elevator to avoid the lobby. "Standard procedure for Mr. Jordan when he wants to maintain privacy." The suite was simple but spacious, with a small sitting area that included a desk and laptop. Mills immediately set up a security perimeter, checking for surveillance devices and positioning himself by the door. Michael plugged the flash drive into the laptop. "Let's see what Walters knew that got him killed." Marcus set up his camera on a tripod, making sure it captured both Michael and the computer screen. This time, no one told him to stop recording. The flash drive contained several folders. The first, labeled Sightings, held a series of text documents with dates and detailed descriptions of men in a blue sedan that Walters had spotted near the gas station over the years. "He kept seeing them," Michael said, skimming the files, "not just in 1993, but periodically after that. The same car, sometimes the same men, returning to the area." The second folder contained newspaper articles about James Jordan's murder, the investigation, and the trial of Green and Demery, all publicly available information. But it was the third folder, labeled Jordan Proof, that caught their attention. Inside was a single video file. "It's a security camera recording," Michael said, as he opened it. "From the gas station. Date stamped July 22, 1993, the night my father disappeared." The video quality was poor, grainy black and white footage from an outdated security system. But they could clearly see the gas station's single pump and the small convenience store entrance. The timestamp in the corner read 11:38 p.m. "There," Mills pointed as a red Lexus pulled up to the pump. "That's your father's car." They watched as James Jordan stepped out, a middle-aged black man in a golf shirt and slacks, moving with a casual confidence that his son had clearly inherited. He filled the tank, then walked into the store. Inside, he chatted briefly with someone off-camera, presumably Thomas Walters, then paid for his gas and a few items before returning to his car. The time stamp now read 11:47 p.m., 9 minutes, Michael said quietly. 9 minutes of the last normal moments of his life. As James Jordan drove away, the camera caught something else, a blue sedan that had been parked across the street, pulling out to follow the Lexus. The image was blurry, but clear enough to confirm what Walters had claimed. He was telling the truth, Marcus said. "Your father was being followed." Michael rewound the video and played it again, freezing it on the blue sedan. "Can you enhance this? See the license plate or the faces?" Marcus leaned in, studying the footage professionally. "The resolution is too low, but I might be able to clean it up somewhat with the right software." He hesitated. "Which I have back at my apartment." Michael and Mills exchanged a look. "We can't go to your apartment," Mills said firmly. "It's too risky. If whoever killed Walters knows about you from the viral video, they might be watching your place." "Then what do we do?" Marcus asked. "I have people who can help," Michael replied. "But first, there's something else I need to show you. Something from the cemetery that wasn't in the footage you posted." He pulled out his phone and accessed a secure folder, then handed it to Marcus. "This is what I didn't want the world to see. What I was most concerned about when I realized I'd been recorded." The video on the phone was different. Higher quality, shot on a professional camera from a different angle than Marcus's hiding spot. It showed Michael at his father's grave, talking about the recurring dream he mentioned to Marcus. But this footage captured something Marcus's camera had missed. Michael placing papers on the grave and reading from them. "You were being recorded too?" Marcus asked, confused. "By who?" By my own team, Michael explained. I've been documenting my investigation for years, creating a record in case something happens to me. My security team films from a distance whenever I visit the cemetery, because that's when I often bring new information to share with my father. Marcus felt a wave of shame wash over him. He thought he was capturing a private moment that the world deserved to see, when, in reality, Michael had already been documenting it himself, on his own terms, with his consent, for a specific purpose. "What were you reading in this video?" Marcus asked. "It looks like a report of some kind." "It's a transcript of an interview with Daniel Green," Michael said, "the man convicted of pulling the trigger." "I thought he's been in prison since 1996, Marcus said. "How did you interview him?" "I didn't. My investigators did, 3 months ago. Green has maintained for decades that he helped dispose of my father's body but didn't kill him. He claims Demery shot my father and then called Green for help afterward." "And you believe him?" Marcus asked. "I believe something about the official story doesn't add up," Michael replied carefully. "And I believe Green might know more than he's saying, might have information about who else was involved." Mills, who had been monitoring the hallway, rejoined the conversation. "The interview with Green revealed something new. He claims that Demery was acting on instructions from someone else, someone who promised them money to make it look like a random carjacking. That matches what we just saw on Walter's video," Marcus observed. "The blue car following your father. This wasn't random." Michael nodded grimly. "Which brings me to what I was saying at the cemetery, what you didn't capture in your footage. The part about my recurring dream." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "You said your father was trying to tell you something important in the dream, something you couldn't quite make out." "Yes, but recently, the dream changed." Michael's voice grew quieter. I could finally hear what he was saying. 3 words. "Check the watch." "The gold watch you brought to the cemetery?" Marcus asked. "The one the killers took?" "Yes. It was recovered during the investigation and returned to our family after the trial." Michael reached into his pocket and removed the watch, carefully wrapped in the same soft cloth Marcus had seen at the cemetery. "I never thought to examine it closely. It was too painful. But after the dream..." He unwrapped the watch and turned it over. The back case had a small, barely noticeable scratch near the edge. "My investigators found something," Michael continued. "The watch case had been opened at some point after my father's death, before it was returned to us." "Opened? Why?" Marcus asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out." Michael carefully pried open the back case of the watch. Inside, where the movement would normally be visible, was a small piece of folded paper. Marcus gasped softly. "There's something hidden inside." With steadying fingers, Michael removed the tiny paper and unfolded it. It contained a series of numbers and letters, handwritten in a cramped style to fit the small space. "NC 48219, DPST 6118, BLK4 LTR3. "A code," Mills observed, "or account numbers of some kind." "My father was an ordinary working man," Michael said. "He worked at GE, he loved his family, he played golf. He wasn't involved in anything that would require secret codes or numbered accounts." "Unless..." Marcus began, then stopped himself. "Unless what?" Michael prompted. "Unless he discovered something by accident, something he wasn't supposed to know." Marcus thought out loud. "Something connected to you, maybe. To your fame or wealth, or connections." Michael considered this possibility. "Dad handled some of my early endorsement deals, not the legal aspects, but he would sometimes deliver contracts or pick up paperwork. He knew people in my business circles. Could he have seen something he wasn't supposed to see? Marcus pressed. Overheard something? If he did, he never mentioned it to me. Michael carefully refolded the paper and placed it in his wallet. But this code might be the reason he was targeted. The reason why, 32 years later, people are still killing to keep the truth hidden. The three men fell silent, contemplating the implications. Thomas Walters was dead. James Jordan had been followed and murdered. Someone had hidden information inside a watch, information worth killing for. And now they had uncovered it. What's our next move? Marcus finally asked. Michael exchanged a look with Mills, some unspoken communication passing between them. We need to figure out what these numbers mean, and we need to move quickly, before whoever killed Walters realizes we have the video and the watch. There's something else, Mills added. Something we haven't told you yet, Marcus. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What? Your viral video didn't just alert the killers that we're investigating, Mills said carefully. It put you in danger, too. Your name and face are now publicly connected to Michael Jordan and this case. The reality of the situation hit Marcus like a physical blow. By uploading that video, he hadn't just invaded Michael's privacy. He had potentially made himself a target. What do we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We keep you close, Michael said simply. Where we can protect you. And in return, you help us document everything properly. Create a record that can't be erased or denied. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding that his life had changed irreversibly. There was no going back to wedding videos and local commercials. He was now part of something dangerous, something deadly serious. I'll do whatever you need, he promised. Whatever it takes to make this right. As Michael began making calls to arrange their next steps, Marcus felt the weight of his camera in his hands. He had wanted to capture Michael Jordan's private grief for his own gain. Instead, he had stumbled into a 32-year-old mystery. That was still claiming lives, and the truth that awaited them might be darker than any of them imagined. By morning, they had moved to a secure location, a lakeside cabin owned by one of Michael's business associates, about 40 miles outside Wilmington. The property was isolated, surrounded by pine trees, with a single access road and security cameras monitoring the perimeter. Marcus sat at a kitchen table cluttered with laptops, printouts, and coffee cups, working on enhancing the gas station security footage. Michael paced nearby, engaged in a hushed phone conversation with someone he referred to only as the professor. Mills had left an hour earlier to meet with contacts at the Wilmington Police Department, hoping to learn more about the investigation into Thomas Walters' murder. The first part looks like a North Carolina license plate number, Michael said as he ended his call and joined Marcus at the table. 7NC48219. My contact is running it through DMV records, but if it's from 1993, it might have been purged from the system. What about the other parts of the code? Marcus asked, looking up from his laptop. DPST 6118 and BLK4 LTR3? DPST could be deposit, maybe a bank account. Michael rubbed his eyes, fatigue evident in his movements. The professor thinks BLK and LTR might refer to some kind of coordinate system or filing system. Block 4, letter 3, like a grid reference. Marcus nodded, returning his attention to the video. He'd spent hours using specialized software to clean up the grainy footage, focusing on the blue sedan that had followed James Jordan from the gas station. The license plate was still unreadable, but he'd managed to sharpen the image of the driver enough to make out basic features. A white man, possibly in his 40s, wearing what looked like a baseball cap. I think I've got the best image we're going to get, Marcus said, turning the screen toward Michael. It's not clear enough for facial recognition, but it might help if we already had suspects to compare it to. Michael studied the enhanced image, his expression unreadable. "Send this to Mills. He can share it with his contacts." As Marcus exported the file, he considered how surreal the past 24 hours had been. Yesterday morning, he'd been a struggling videographer desperate for a break. Now he was working alongside Michael Jordan, investigating a murder that had connections to one of the most famous crimes in sports history. "Why did you really let me help with this?" Marcus asked, suddenly. "After what I did, you could have sued me, ruined me. Instead, you brought me into something this personal, this dangerous." Michael was quiet for a long moment, seemingly weighing how much to share. "When my father died, the world saw it as a tragic footnote to my career. Michael Jordan's father murdered was just another headline about Michael Jordan, not about James Jordan, the man." He sat down across from Marcus. "But you saw something different at the cemetery. You kept filming not just because it was me, but because you recognized the grief, the connection between a son and his father." "Because of my own dad," Marcus said softly. "Yes." Michael's voice held no warmth, but some of the coldness had gone. "And because keeping you close lets me control what happens next with that footage, with this story. If this investigation leads where I think it might, I need someone documenting it properly." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Mills. "Turn on the news, now." Marcus grabbed the remote and switched on the cabin's television. Breaking news banners flashed across the screen as a reporter stood outside the Rockfish AME Church Cemetery. Sources confirmed that NBA legend Michael Jordan visited his father's grave yesterday, on the 32nd anniversary of James Jordan's 1993 murder, the reporter said. Hours later, this video appeared online, showing Jordan's private graveside conversation. The screen cut to a brief clip from Marcus's footage, Michael sitting by the headstone, speaking about his father's watch. But in a shocking development, the reporter continued, police are now investigating a potentially related homicide. Thomas Walters, a former gas station attendant who may have been one of the last people to see James Jordan alive, was found murdered in his home last night. Authorities are not confirming any connection between the cases, but sources tell us Walters had recently been in contact with private investigators. Marcus felt his stomach drop. They're connecting the dots in public now. Michael's phone rang. It was Mills. "I just saw the news," Michael said without preamble. "How bad is it?" Marcus could only hear Michael's side of the conversation, but it was enough to understand that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Keep me posted," Michael said finally, ending the call. He turned to Marcus. The police found prints at Walter's house that match a known associate of Daniel Green, a man who wasn't involved in the original case, but visited Green in prison multiple times over the years. "Someone's tying up loose ends," Marcus said. "First Walters, and now they're trying to frame it on someone connected to the original killers." Michael nodded grimly. "Which means they know we have the flash drive and the watch. They're trying to redirect the investigation back to Green and Demery." Marcus's laptop chimed with an incoming email. "It's from someone called the Professor," he said, checking the notification. Michael came around to look over his shoulder as Marcus opened the email. It contained only a short message and an attachment. "Found a match for the code. DPST 6118 was a safety deposit box at First Carolina Bank, closed in 1997. BLK4 LTR3 refers to a storage facility outside Charlotte. Unit B4C3. The license plate was registered to Victor Gutierrez, the same man whose pager received calls from James Jordan's car phone after his death. Attached is the police report from Gutierrez's fatal car accident in 1997. Look at the investigating officer's name. Be careful. Marcus opened the attachment. A scanned police report for a single vehicle accident on August 14, 1997. The driver, Victor Gutierrez, was pronounced dead at the scene after his car went off the road and caught fire. The investigating officer's name was circled in red. Detective Robert Sullivan. Sullivan, Michael said, the name clearly significant to him. He was one of the lead detectives on my father's case. He retired from the Charlotte PD in 2002. Where is he now? Marcus asked. Florida. Last I heard, living on a police pension. Michael was already dialing Mills again. We need to find him. He's the connection. As Michael briefed Mills on this new development, Marcus searched online for information about Robert Sullivan. There wasn't much. A few newspaper articles mentioning his work on high-profile cases, including the James Jordan murder, and a brief mention of his retirement. No recent photos, no social media presence. Mills is tracking Sullivan's current location, Michael said as he ended the call, and he's arranging security for my family. If these people have been watching me for years, they might target those close to me to stop this investigation. The gravity of the situation hit Marcus anew. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth about a murder from 3 decades ago. Real people were in danger now, because of a video he had posted. I'm sorry, he said, for what felt like the 100th time. I never thought. Stop apologizing, Michael cut him off. It doesn't change anything. Just help me finish this. Marcus nodded, refocusing on the task at hand. So we have a license plate registered to Victor Gutierrez, who later died in a suspicious accident. We have a safety deposit box number and a storage unit. And we have a detective who worked your father's case and investigated Gutierrez's death. They're all connected somehow. The storage unit is the key, Michael said. If it still exists, if anything is still there after all these years, it might tell us what my father knew that got him killed. Marcus's phone buzzed with another text from Mills. Sullivan located. Sarasota, FL. Own a boat called Early Retirement. Flight arranged for you both. 2 p.m. from private airstrip. I'll meet you there. Come alone. Michael read the message over Marcus's shoulder and made a decision. Pack up. We're going to Florida. They gathered their equipment. Marcus felt a strange mix of fear and determination. He had started this journey trying to capture Michael Jordan's private grief for his own gain. Now, he was helping Michael pursue answers that had eluded him for 32 years. Whatever we find, Michael said as they loaded the car, I want it all on record. Film everything from now on. Everything, Marcus agreed, securing his camera in its case, no matter where it leads. As they drove away from the cabin, neither man spoke of the possibility that had begun to take shape in both their minds, that James Jordan's murder might not have been the work of 2 young criminals looking for a luxury car to steal, but something far more calculated. A deliberate killing meant to send a message, to protect a secret, or perhaps to hurt Michael Jordan in the most personal way possible. And if that was true, then the real killer had never faced justice, had never even been suspected. Until now, the private jet cut through clouds as it descended toward Sarasota, Florida. Michael sat silently, reviewing the files they'd compiled. Marcus filmed through the window, capturing the coastline coming into view. Neither had slept much in the past 24 hours, running on adrenaline and determination. Mills was waiting on the tarmac when they landed, standing beside a nondescript black sedan. The July Florida heat hit them like a wall as they stepped off the plane. Sullivan lives in a gated community on Siesta Key, Mills reported as they drove, wiping sweat from his brow. Waterfront property with his own dock and boat. Lives alone, since his wife died 3 years ago. What's our approach? Michael asked, his focus unwavering despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes. Direct, Mills said. He's 78 years old and has a heart condition. Not much of a physical threat, but he was a cop for 30 years. He'll be suspicious of strangers showing up unannounced. Marcus adjusted his camera settings, preparing to document whatever came next. What if he refuses to talk to us? He won't refuse me, Michael said with quiet certainty. Not when he sees what we have. Their destination was a Spanish-style villa, in an upscale community of similar homes, all with boat access to the Gulf of Mexico. Palm trees lined the street, and sprinklers fought a constant battle against the Florida heat. It looked peaceful, prosperous, far removed from the violent deaths of James Jordan and Thomas Walters. Mills rang the doorbell while Michael and Marcus waited a few steps back. After a long pause, the door opened to reveal an elderly white man, with a deeply tanned face and thinning white hair. He wore khaki shorts and a golf shirt with a country club logo. "Mr. Sullivan?" Mills began. "My name is—" "I know who you are," Sullivan interrupted, his eyes moving past Mills to Michael. "And I know who he is. I've been expecting you." The statement hung in the air for a moment before Sullivan stepped back, opening his Dr. wider. "You might as well come in. Been waiting 32 years for this conversation." The interior of the house was cool and dim after the bright Florida sun. Sullivan led them to a sunroom overlooking the water, where a boat called Early Retirement was docked. "Camera stays off," Sullivan said, pointing to Marcus's equipment. "No recordings," Michael shook his head. "The camera stays on. Whatever you tell us gets documented." Sullivan stared at Michael for a long moment, then shrugged. "Your funeral." He gestured for them to sit while he poured himself a drink from a bar cart in the corner. 32 years I've been waiting for you to show up at my door, Michael Jordan. 32 years wondering when you'd figure it out." "Figure what out?" Michael asked, remaining standing while Mills and Marcus took seats. "That your father wasn't. Killed by 2 punk kids looking for a Lexus." Sullivan sipped his drink. "That it was a professional hit, made to look like a random carjacking gone wrong." Marcus felt a chill despite the Florida heat as he filmed Sullivan's confession. "You knew," Michael said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You knew all along," Sullivan nodded slowly. "I suspected from the beginning. The crime scene was too clean in some ways, too messy in others. Green and Demery were known troublemakers, but they'd never done anything this sophisticated." "So you covered it up?" Michael's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Let the wrong men take the full blame?" "They weren't innocent," Sullivan countered. "They did help dispose of your father's body. They did steal his car, his belongings. But no, they didn't pull the trigger." "Who did?" Michael demanded. Sullivan took another sip, ice clinking against glass. "Victor Gutierrez, professional hitman with cartel connections. Used to work for a man named Angelo Marino." The name meant nothing to Marcus, but Michael's reaction was immediate. A sharp intake of breath, a narrowing of eyes. "Marino? The Chicago?" "Bookie?" Michael asked. Sullivan nodded. "The same. You remember him, I'm sure." Marcus kept the camera steady, though his mind was racing. He'd read about Michael Jordan's gambling in his research for the college project on famous cold cases. The basketball star had been known to bet on golf games, card games, even trivial matters, his competitive nature extending beyond the basketball court. "I placed some bets with Marino in the early 90s, Michael acknowledged. "Small stuff, nothing serious." Sullivan gave a humorless laugh. "Nothing serious to you, maybe. But by 1993, You owed Marino over $1 million in gambling debts. Debts? You weren't paying fast enough for his liking. The accusation hung in the air. Michael shook his head firmly. That's not true. I never had debts like that. Never. Your father found out, Sullivan continued, as if Michael hadn't spoken. He was handling some of your finances back then, wasn't he? Came across records of the debts, confronted Marino directly when he was in Chicago visiting you. Threatened to go to the NBA, to the police. Michael's expression revealed nothing, but Marcus could see his jaw clenching tightly. That's why they targeted him, Sullivan said, finishing his drink. A message to you. Pay your debts. Keep your mouth shut about who you were betting with. And a reminder that they could get to anyone you cared about. If that's true, Mills interjected, why didn't you investigate Marino? Why let Green and Demery take the fall for everything? Sullivan set his glass down carefully. Because I was on Marino's payroll too. Had been for years, feeding him information about police investigations, helping make problems disappear. When your father's case landed on my desk, I got a call making it very clear how the investigation should proceed. Marcus could barely believe what he was hearing. A police detective admitting to corruption, to helping cover up the true circumstances of James Jordan's murder. And the storage unit? Michael asked. DPST 6118, BLK4 LTR3, the code my father hid in his watch. Your father was smarter than Marino gave him credit for, Sullivan said, with something like respect in his voice. He made copies of everything he found about your gambling debts. Kept evidence. The safety deposit box held the key to a storage unit, where he hid it all. Betting. Slips, bank statements, photos of you with known bookies. Insurance, in case anything happened to him. And Gutierrez? The accident in 1997? Michael pressed. Wasn't an accident. Sullivan confirmed what they had already suspected. Marino tied up loose ends. Gutierrez knew too much, and I wrote up the accident report just like I was told to. Michael paced the sunroom, processing everything he'd heard. Why tell us this now? Why confess after all these years? Sullivan gestured toward the water view. Terminal cancer. 6 months to live, according to my doctors. And I'm tired of carrying these secrets. He looked directly at Marcus's camera. I want this on record. A deathbed confession, if you will. Where is Marino now? Mills asked. Dead. Heart attack in 2008. Sullivan smiled thinly. But his organization still exists. His son runs it now. Anthony Marino. He's the one who ordered. The hit on your gas station witness. The pieces were finally falling into place. James Jordan hadn't been the victim of random violence, but a deliberate targeting meant to send a message to his famous son. And the same organization was still active, still killing to protect its secrets. I'll testify to all of this, Sullivan said. Provide names, dates, evidence of the cover-up. In exchange, I want immunity for my role. Let me die in this house, not in prison. Michael looked at the man who had helped cover up his father's murder for more than 3 decades. His expression gave nothing away. The storage unit, Michael said finally. Is it still there? Does the evidence still exist? Sullivan nodded. As far as I know, Unit B4C3 at Charlotte Security Storage. Paid up for 50 years back in 1993. Your father was nothing if not thorough. Michael turned to Mills. Call the Charlotte police. Have them secure that storage unit immediately. And find a prosecutor we can trust with all of this. As Mills stepped away to make the calls, Michael approached Sullivan, towering over the seated man. You helped hide the truth about my father's murder. You let me believe for 32 years that it was just bad luck, just a random act of violence. I Did, Sullivan admitted, and I've lived with that every day since. Michael nodded once, then turned to Marcus. You got all that? Every word, Marcus confirmed, the red light on his camera still blinking. Good. Michael looked back at Sullivan. Because this isn't just going to the police. The whole world is going to know what really happened to James Jordan. 3 days later, Marcus sat in Michael's Chicago office, editing the final version of the documentary they had decided to create. The storage unit had been found intact, containing exactly what Sullivan had described, evidence of gambling debts and threats that had led to James Jordan's murder. Anthony Marino had been arrested at his Chicago home, charged with ordering the murder of Thomas Walters and conspiracy in relation to James Jordan's death. Sullivan was cooperating with prosecutors, his terminal diagnosis confirmed by court-appointed doctors. Green and Demery remained in prison, but with the new evidence, their legal teams were filing motions for resentencing hearings, arguing that, while they were guilty of crimes related to James Jordan's death, they were not guilty of his actual murder. And the viral video that had started it all, Michael Jordan's private graveside conversation with his father, had been removed from the internet by Marcus himself, replaced with a public apology and a promise that the full story would soon be told through an authorized documentary. How's it coming? Michael asked, entering the office where Marcus had set up a temporary editing bay. Almost finished, Marcus replied, gesturing to the monitors showing various footage. The Sullivan confession is powerful, and the evidence from the storage unit tells the story clearly. Michael nodded, looking at the screens. My family has reviewed it. They've given their approval. The two men had developed an unusual relationship over the past week. Not quite friendship, but a partnership born of extraordinary circumstances. The betrayal that had brought them together would never be forgotten, but it had led to a truth that might otherwise have remained buried. There's one more thing I thought should be included, Marcus said hesitantly. With your permission. He clicked over to a new footage sequence, Michael at his father's grave, this time filmed properly, with his consent. In this new footage, Michael placed a single baseball on the headstone, the same one from his childhood that he had mentioned during his private visit. I went back this morning, Michael explained. Needed to tell him we found the truth, that justice is finally coming. Is it enough? Marcus asked quietly. After all these years, is knowing the truth enough? Michael considered the question. It doesn't bring him back. Nothing can do that. But yes, knowing matters. Living with lies is its own kind of prison. As they finalized the documentary that would soon share the full story with the world, Marcus reflected on how differently things had turned out from what he had imagined when he hid behind those trees with his camera. He had sought fame and found something far more meaningful. The chance to help right a terrible wrong, to bring truth to light after decades of darkness. What will you do now? Michael asked, as they prepared to end their unlikely collaboration. Start over, Marcus said simply. Do better. Make things I can be proud of. Michael nodded, understanding. We all have to live with the choices we make. The good ones and the bad ones. As Marcus packed up his equipment, Michael handed him a small box. Inside was a simple silver watch. My father would have wanted you to have this, Michael said. Not. The gold one, that's going to be evidence now. But this was his everyday watch, the one he wore coaching my games, working in the yard. The real him. Marcus looked up, surprised by the gesture. Why would you give me this? After what I did? Because, in the end, you helped find the truth. And because, he would have said, everyone, deserves a second chance to get it right. Michael's expression remained serious, but there was something like peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Just don't waste it." Marcus nodded, carefully placing the watch on his wrist. "I won't, I promise." As he left Michael Jordan's office that day, Marcus understood that some betrayals can never be fully forgiven, but they can sometimes lead to unexpected redemption. And some truths, no matter how painful, are worth the cost of uncovering them. James Jordan's real killer would finally face justice. Michael had the answers he had sought for 32 years, and Marcus had learned that the most compelling stories aren't stolen in moments of private grief, but earned through the difficult pursuit of truth. The watch on his wrist would remind him of that lesson every day for the rest of his life. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this emotional journey into one of basketball's greatest legends and the mystery surrounding his father's death, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you compelling stories like this one regularly, blending fact and fiction to explore the human side of famous figures. Don't forget to share this video with friends and family who might appreciate it. Not only does sharing help our community grow, but it also spreads awareness about the power of family bonds and the importance of seeking truth, no matter how long it takes. Until next time, thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when no one else is watching, or at least when no one is supposed to be watching.